Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of unexplored villains' dark figures, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Tonight we turn our gaze toward one of the strangest, most unsettling figures in all of Oo's history. He is not a towering monster, nor a cosmic entity. He is not born from the ruins of the Mushroom War, or conjured from ancient spells buried deep within the land. Instead, he is something far more intimate, far more personal. He is a heart, torn from the body of a lonely king. This is the story of Ricardio the Heart Guy. At first glance, Ricardio seems almost comical. An oversized walking heart with a mischievous smile and a strange, charming voice. But as with so many of Adventure Time's darker figures, what makes him unsettling is not his appearance alone. It is what he represents and the sorrowful truth of where he came from. For Ricardio was not simply created out of thin air. He was born from the Ice King's very heart, a piece of Simon Petrikov's broken soul given shape and independence. To understand Ricardio, we must begin with the Ice King himself. The lonely monarch of ice, once a kind-hearted man named Simon, carries a burden unlike any other. His crown, infused with ancient magic, saved him from the destruction of the Great Mushroom War. But it also cursed him. It twisted his mind, eroded his memory, and left him clutching at fragments of his former self. What remained was a being defined by longing. Longing for companionship, for love, for recognition. His castle of ice stood high upon the mountain peak, but within its walls was only isolation, only the echo of his own voice, desperate for someone to hear him. From this deep loneliness, something fractured, and that fracture took form. Ricardio is not just a villainous trickster. He is the embodiment of what the Ice King wanted most, but could never truly have. A heart that could charm, seduce, and win affection where he himself could not. He is the mirror of Simon's yearning, twisted into something selfish and cruel. When Ricardio first appeared in the Candy Kingdom, he seemed polite, sophisticated, even suave. His manners contrasted sharply with the bumbling, socially awkward Ice King. He danced with the Princess Bubblegum, whispered sweet words, and carried himself with a confidence that the Ice King never possessed. But beneath this facade there was a dark hunger. Ricardio's charm was not born of kindness, but of manipulation. He desired not love, but possession, not companionship, but control. And here lies the unsettling truth. Ricardio was everything the Ice King thought he wanted to be, yet also everything Simon never truly was. Where Simon had once been gentle, compassionate, and caring, Ricardio was cold, predatory, and cunning. He was a hollow echo of romance, stripped of sincerity, and left only with appetite. Imagine for a moment what it means for a man's heart to split away from it, to walk the world with its own desire. If the Ice King was defined by longing, then Ricardio was defined by the shadows of that longing. He was the part of Simon that had been poisoned by the crown's madness, the part that sought love not through kindness, but through control and obsession. There is a chilling poetry in the fact that Ricardio wished to claim Princess Bubblegum's heart, quite literally. In one of his most unsettling moments, he revealed his plan to cut her heart from her chest and replace his own hollow form with it. This image lingers like a dark dream, grotesque yet symbolic. Ricardio wanted not simply to love, but to consume, to take what was not his and force it into himself. In this way, he reflected the Ice King's own misguided approach to love, capturing princesses, trying to force their affection, never understanding that love cannot be taken, only given. When we look closely, Ricardio becomes less a villain in his own right and more an exposed nerve of the Ice King's psyche. He is what happens when yearning curdles into obsession. He is the loneliness of Simon, stripped of warmth, manifesting as something cold and calculating. And perhaps that is why he is so disturbing. He is not entirely separate from Ice King. He is Ice King, but without the fragments of humanity that still lingered inside Simon. What makes Ricardio especially haunting is the way he carries himself with such elegance. Unlike the Ice King's frantic, desperate energy, Ricardio was composed, eloquent, and deliberate. It's as though, when Simon's heart was pulled free, it shed all hesitation and doubt, leaving only raw desire. But without the soul to temper it, that desire became predatory. This contrast makes us wonder, was Ricardio truly evil, or was he simply incomplete? A heart, after all, is meant to feel. It is meant to beat within the chest, supported by mind and spirit. Alone, it is only a fragment. Could Ricardio ever have been whole if he had been reunited with Simon? Or was he doomed from the moment he came into existence, destined to act only as a reflection of pain and emptiness? Adventure Time never gave us a complete answer. Ricardio remained a figure who returned only briefly, always leaving us with more questions than answers. But in those glimpses, we see a profound metaphor. Ricardio is loneliness turned inside out, given a face and a voice. He is the embodiment of the dangers of longing without love, of obsession without connection. And in this sense, he is more than just a strange, unsettling villain. He is a reminder that sometimes our darkest enemies are not those outside of us, but those born within. When we think about Ricardio's origins, there is a striking intimacy in how he was created. He is not a monster summoned by ancient rituals, nor a villain who rose from the ashes of the Mushroom War. He came from something much closer, something far more vulnerable. He was torn from within, pulled out of the Ice King himself. This alone sets him apart from so many of Oo's darker figures. He is not a stranger intruding upon the kingdom. He is family in a way, a piece of Simon's broken self wandering free. That detail gives his story a very different texture. When we look at Ricardio walking across the Candy Kingdom's ballroom floor, charming Princess Bubblegum, with a bow of his heart-shaped form, it is almost as if Simon's heart is trying desperately to prove that it still remembers how to love, and yet, without Simon's guidance, without the warmth of a human soul to steady it, the heart becomes twisted, like a melody played slightly out of tune. There is something deeply symbolic here. Ricardio reflects the danger of separating parts of ourselves, of casting away pieces we find too painful to hold. The Ice King's mind was already shattered by the crown, his memories scattered like snow in a blizzard. To have his heart step out into the world, acting independently, is like a dream image of what grief and madness can do. The body continues, the mind stumbles on, but the heart is absent, wandering, searching for fulfillment it cannot find. When Ricardio speaks, his words drip with confidence. He flatters, he persuades, and he moves with an elegance that makes him almost magnetic. But his charm has a hollowness. It is like a mask, polished and bright, yet empty behind the eyes. Unlike Simon, whose compassion once gave warmth to his relationship, Ricardio seeks only to capture. His affection is predatory, not nurturing. And this is perhaps the most unsettling truth about him. He is love without empathy, desire without care. It is no coincidence that Ricardio fixates on Princess Bubblegum. She is the heart of the Candy Kingdom, a ruler beloved by her people, a figure of intellect and compassion. To Ricardio, she represents everything he is not. By taking her heart, literally and symbolically, he imagines that he might fill the emptiness within himself. He believes that by consuming what he lacks, he will finally be whole. But of course, that is not how wholeness works. Love cannot be stolen, nor can identity be patched together with stolen pieces. In trying to seize her heart, Ricardio reveals the futility of his very existence. We might even wonder if Ricardio is aware of this emptiness. Beneath his sly smile and smooth words, does he know that he is incomplete? Does he sense that he is only a fragment, destined to wither without the body and soul that once gave him meaning? The possibility adds a layer of tragedy to his villainy. Perhaps he lashes out not only from cruelty, but from desperation. Perhaps he knows that he cannot survive as he is, and in his confusion, he reaches outward, trying to claim what he can never truly possess. In many ways, Ricardio stands as a mirror for the Ice King's own mistakes. Where the Ice King locks princesses in cages, Ricardio tries to steal their hearts. Where the Ice King blunders with awkward gestures of affection, Ricardio glides with elegance and false confidence. Both fail, and both reveal the same flaw, the inability to understand that love cannot be forced. They are two sides of the same coin, the clownish desperation of Simon's fractured mind and the cold cunning of his fractured heart. This duality makes Ricardio one of the most fascinating dark figures in Adventure Time. Unlike the grand cosmic villains who threaten entire worlds with their power, Ricardio's menace is small and intimate. His danger lies in what he represents about the human condition, the fear that parts of ourselves, once wounded, can turn against us. He is not evil in the way the Lich is. He does not seek universal destruction. Instead, he seeks to fill an emptiness, to resolve a longing, but in the most twisted and misguided of ways. And that is what makes him so quietly terrifying. As we reflect on Ricardio, it is important to notice the way the show uses him sparingly. He does not appear often, and when he does, his presence feels almost dreamlike. He enters the stage, whispers his unsettling lines, and disappears again into the shadows of memory. This brevity makes him more powerful. He is like a recurring nightmare that you cannot quite shake, a strange figure who appears in dreams only to remind you of something painful you've tried to forget. And perhaps that is why he lingers in the minds of so many fans. Even though his role in the series was relatively small, Ricardio leaves an imprint because he speaks to something universal. Who among us has not felt fracture or carried a part of themselves that seemed to act against their better nature? Who has not feared that their deepest longings might curdle into something unhealthy, or that their heart might betray them by seeking what it should not? Ricardio embodies that fear. He is the heart that no longer listens to reason, the longing that becomes dangerous and separated from compassion. He is the reminder that love without kindness becomes hunger, and hunger, when it has no true nourishment, only devours. There is another layer to Ricardio's existence that makes him even more haunting. The fact that he does not remain a simple one-time villain. He returns later in a weakened and almost pitiful state, his once proud confidence diminished. This reappearance offers a strange glimpse into what happens when a fragment of a person tries to survive without the whole. When Ricardio came back, his body was frail, and his presence seemed less commanding. The elegance that once defined him was slipping, replaced by desperation. He sought ways to restore himself, to regain the strength that was fading away. This decline paints him not only as a villain, but as a tragic figure. Without Simon's body to anchor him, without the wholeness of being, he was slowly unraveling. His sharp words and cunning could no longer hide the simple truth. A heart cannot live forever on its own. This is what makes Ricardio so unique among Adventure Time's gallery of dark figures. He is not entirely an enemy to be defeated, nor is he simply a creature of pure evil. He is instead a reminder of what happens when parts of ourselves break away, when they try to survive without connection to the rest of who we are. His villainy, if we can call it that, is born not from grand ambition, but from a fundamental incompleteness. It is almost as though the universe itself was telling a story through him. A heart separated from the body cannot truly flourish. It can chase after love. It can put on a mask of charm. It can even inspire fear, but in the end, it will wither. Ricardio is a fragment trying to be whole, and in that effort, he mirrors something deeply human. Many of us know what it feels like to carry wounds in the heart, to feel like pieces of ourselves have been left behind. We may not manifest them as literal walking hearts, but they appear in other ways, in unhealthy habits, in lingering obsessions, in the echoes of relationships that ended but never quite let go. Ricardio's story takes this familiar human experience and turns it into something surreal and dreamlike, so that we might see it more clearly. The way he pursues Princess Bubblegum in particular is telling. She is the very opposite of him in so many ways. She is whole, composed, intelligent, and deeply rooted in her identity. Ricardio, by contrast, is fractured, incomplete, and desperate. His longing for her is not just romantic or physical, it is existential. By possessing her heart, he imagines that he could solve the problem of his own existence. But this is an impossible task. Wholeness cannot be stolen. It must be nurtured. And so his quest was doomed from the very beginning. This brings us to an important theme. Ricardio is less about the danger he poses to others and more about the warning he represents to it. He shows us the danger of chasing wholeness through possession, of seeking completion by consuming or controlling someone else. It is a warning whispered through the world of Ooo, reminding us that love cannot be built on hunger alone. The elegance of his character design adds to this unsettling duality. On one hand, he looks comical, even silly, an oversized heart with spindly arms and legs. Yet his deep voice, refined mannerism, and sophisticated words clash with his odd form. This contrast makes him uncanny. He should be harmless, almost laughable, yet his presence feels heavy, as though he carries an unseen shadow with him. Adventure Time often used this kind of dissonance to create unease. When something looks playful but behaves with disturbing intent, the result lingers longer in the mind. In Ricardio's case, the dissonance is part of the storytelling. He is the Ice King's heart, but without the awkward humor or fragile humanity of Simon. He is charming in a way that Simon never was, but that charm is hollow. He is strong in a way that Simon never could be, but that strength is fleeting. He is the fantasy of what Simon thought he wanted to be, but the reality of what that fantasy would cost. We could even look at Ricardio as a metaphor for toxic desire, the kind of longing that does not seek connection, but control. His desire for Princess Bubblegum is not about understanding her, caring for her, or cherishing. It is about consuming her, taking her essence to fill the void inside himself. This is not love at all, but something darker masquerading as love. In many ways, Ricardio is a warning tale dressed in the playful colors of Adventure Time. And yet beneath all of this, there remains a thread of sadness. When we see Ricardio weakened, struggling to hold himself together, it is difficult not to feel a flicker of pity. He did not choose to be torn from the Ice King's chest. He did not choose to live as a fragment. He was born out of loneliness, out of Simon's endless longing, and perhaps in another world, he might have lived differently. Perhaps, if Simon had never been cursed by the crown, Ricardio would never have existed at all. This is the tragic irony. Ricardio's very existence is a wound. He is a living scar, the proof of what the crown's madness did to Simon's soul. And because of this, his story cannot end in triumph or redemption. He is too deeply tied to the pain of his creation. He is not simply a villain, but a reminder of what was lost and what cannot be restored. The Land of Ooo is full of creatures that embody great themes. The Lich as pure death, Hunson Abadir as the hunger of chaos, Orgalorg as cosmic power disguised. But Ricardio stands apart because his domain is the heart. Not the heart as a symbol of joy and connection, but the heart as a vulnerable organ that can be broken, torn away, and twisted into something unrecognizable. His story tells us that even within a world of candy people, magical artifacts, and cosmic battles, the most frightening enemy can still come from within. As Ricardio's story winds deeper into memory, we see the way he lingers, not only as a character, but as a haunting idea. He is one of those figures who stays with us long after his brief appearance, because he is less a villain to be defeated and more a mystery to be pondered. Even in his defeat, even in his weakened return, he leaves questions floating like whisper in the quiet night. One of those questions is whether Ricardio could ever have been healed. If he had been reunited with the Ice King, if Simon's fractured mind had been restored and his heart brought back into his body, might Ricardio have dissolved back into something whole? Could the fragment have found peace in reunion? Or was he forever severed, too far gone to mend? Adventure Time never gave us a clear answer, and perhaps that is the point. The ambiguity makes his existence all the more dreamlike, as if he were never meant to be fully explained. Instead, he is left to drift like a shadow in the background of Oo's story, unsettling because he cannot be neatly resolved. His story, like many of the show's darker threads, lingers without conclusion. In this way, Ricardio reflects the way real wounds work. We often do not find closure. We do not always reclaim the pieces of ourselves we lost. Some parts remain fractured, wandering through memory, reminding us of what was broken. Ricardio is the embodiment of that kind of wound, a wound that walks and speaks, a reminder of what cannot simply be undone. When we return to the idea of him as Ice King's heart, the tragedy grows even heavier. For Simon's tragedy was already profound. He had lost his fiancée, Betty. He had lost his identity, his memory, his sense of self. The crown had torn apart his mind. But Ricardio shows us that even his heart was not safe. Even that most essential piece of him was broken free, forced to stumble through the world without guidance or warmth. It is almost unbearable to imagine the loneliness that could birth such a creature. And yet this is why Ricardio is not simply frightening, he is sorrowful. His villainy is wrapped in tragedy, his cruelty born of incompleteness. He is a heart that longs for connection, but cannot understand how to achieve it, because he has been severed from the body and soul that gave him meaning. In this sense, Ricardio is as much a victim of the crown's curse as Simon himself. If we let ourselves look at Ricardio through the softer lens, his attempts to steal Princess Bubblegum's heart take on another shade of meaning. It is not only hunger, not only cruelty, it is desperation. It is a fragment of a man's broken heart, trying to find a way to keep beating. It is misguided. It is dangerous. But it is also pitiful. He is searching for something he cannot name because the language of love has been stripped away from him. All that remains is appetite. And perhaps this is what makes him such a powerful addition to adventure has been stripped away from him. All that remains is appetite. And perhaps this is what makes him such a powerful addition to Adventure Time's tapestry of dark figure. While others embody death, chaos, or cosmic destruction, Ricardio embodies something painfully human, the broken heart. He is not grand, not mighty, not infinite. He is small, personal, and intimate, and in his smallness, he becomes far more relatable. His horror is the horror of loneliness. His danger is the danger of obsession. His tragedy is the tragedy of being incomplete. When we think of Ricardio now, years after Adventure Time's final episode, he feels almost like a dream half remembered. His voice, deep and smooth, still echoes faintly, but his image drifts in and out of clarity. Was he really just a walking heart? Was his smile as unsettling as we recall? Or has memory exaggerated him as dreams often do? This quality of half-memory makes him even more like a ghost than a villain. He belongs to that part of the show that exists in whispers and shadows, never fully explained, always slightly out of reach. And so, in closing this segment, let us think of Ricardio not simply as a foe defeated by Finn and Jake, but as a reminder stitched into the very fabric of Ooo. He is what happens when the heart is torn away from the self, when loneliness and longing are allowed to fester to something hungry and strange. He is Ice King's sorrow given shape. He is Simon's heartbreak, walking on spindly legs. When next we think of the Ice King, perched in his lonely castle of snow, muttering to himself about princesses and longing for company, we can remember that somewhere in that same story, his very heart once broke away, desperate to find love on its own. It failed, of course. It could never succeed. But the attempt tells us something important, that even in madness, even in tragedy, the heart still yearns. It still seeks warmth, even if it no longer knows how to find it. Ricardio's tale is unsettling, yes, but it is also tender in its own strange way. It is the story of a fragment searching for wholeness and failing. And perhaps that is why he remains one of the most haunting dark figures in Adventure Time. Not because of his cruelty, but because of his sadness. He is the heart of a lonely king, broken loose and doomed to wander. The world of Ooo is full of whispers if one listens carefully enough. Some come from the wind that bends through ruined towers, carrying the memories of a fallen age. Some come from the waters of forgotten rivers, murmuring to those who walk along their bank. There is another kind of whisper, one that slithers not from nature's breath, but from the shadow of something much darker. It is faint, unsettling, and filled with promises one should never trust. And at the heart of this mystery lies the Lich's whispering mushroom, a presence small in size, yet vast in consequence. Long after the Lich's schemes have been seemingly undone, the remnants of his influence linger. Like ashes that float in the air long after the fire has been smothered, pieces of his corruption remain, waiting for the right moment to stir again. Among these fragments, few are as haunting or symbolic as the whispering mushroom, a lonely stalk of fungus, unassuming to the casual eye, breathing with a quiet malice. It does not roar like the Lich himself, nor strike with overt violence. Instead, it plants thoughts. It sows seeds of unease. It turns the stillness of the night into a stage where doubt and temptation creep softly into the hearts of those who stumble too near. To understand the mushroom, we must first return to the nature of the Lich himself. The Lich is not just the villain to be fought and defeated like any other. He is entropy given form, destruction wearing a crown of bone. Every appearance of his is less about his physical body and more about the idea that corruption is eternal. Even when he is struck down, even when his essence is banished, the thought of him lingers like a poison in the soil. It is here that the mushroom plays its role. It is not the Lich's full, skeletal grandeur. It is not his hand raised in command. Instead, it is the lingering echo of his voice, small but insidious, carrying on the work of decay in the quiet corners where heroes rarely tread. When Finn and Jake encounter this strange fungus, it feels at first like a trick of the imagination. A mushroom, after all, is something harmless, even a little silly. But when it begins to speak, when its whispers begin to bend toward cruelty and suggestion, we realize that it is not simply a mushroom at all. It is an extension of the Lich's will, a root that has pierced through the fabric of the world, feeding off its history, waiting patiently for the chance to bloom again. The mushroom becomes a reminder that the Lich never truly disappears. His darkness seeps into the cracks of Ooo, spreading in ways that are subtle, patient, and almost impossible to uproot. There is something profoundly unsettling in this idea. Villains often announce themselves with grand gestures, with dramatic battles and declaration. The mushroom, however, is quiet. It shows us that evil can survive not only in armies and destruction, but in whispers that corrupt the mind. It thrives in the delicate spaces between thoughts, where one can almost mistake its voice for their own. That is what makes it so haunting. A grand enemy can be fought, but how does one fight a whisper, especially when that whisper takes root inside? As a bedtime story, this detail feels especially eerie, almost like the fairy tales told long ago where mushrooms and forests hid secret dangers. But within Adventure Time, it is also symbolic of something larger. The whispering mushroom represents the persistence of trauma and the way darkness lingers even when one believes they have escaped it. Just as the world of Ooo continues to carry the scars of the Mushroom War, the people of Ooo carry scars from the battles against the Lich. His essence lingers not because he is invincible, but because destruction is never so easily healed. It leaves shadows behind, and those shadows sometimes find voices. What makes the mushroom even more curious is how it blends with the natural world. Mushrooms themselves are organisms of decay. They grow from rot, feeding on what has passed away, thriving in the dark and damp places where life has ended. How fitting, then, that the Lich's voice would find a home in such a vessel. A mushroom is not beautiful like a flower, nor towering like a tree. It is humble, quiet, and often overlooked. Yet it spreads underground, unseen, weaving networks that stretch farther than one might imagine. In this way, the mushroom is a perfect metaphor for corruption that hides beneath the surface, spreading silently until it is too late to notice. And so when we reflect on this little figure, this whispering stalk in the earth, we begin to realize that it is more than just a clever detail. It is the story's way of telling us that evil is rarely eradicated in a single blow. It survives, disguised and diminished, waiting in places where we least expect it. The mushroom teaches us caution, patience, and humility. It is not loud, but its quietness is what makes it dangerous. To think of the mushroom as simply a leftover piece of the Lich is to miss some of its quiet brilliance. It is not just a remnant, it is a strategy, a fragment designed to outlast, to influence, and to wait. The Lich has always been portrayed as patient. He is not a villain who rushes headlong into battle, but rather one who waits for weakness, who whispers through cracks in the world, who nudges events toward collapse. The mushroom is an embodiment of this patience. While a fiery clash with the Lich might burn brightly in memory, the mushroom sits in shadow, still working its subtle art, long after the battle has faded. What makes this so unsettling is the way it mirrors our own experience with lingering fear or sadness. Even when a storm has passed, sometimes the echo of thunder still feels alive in our bones. Even when a difficult chapter of life has closed, its whispers can echo in the back of the mind. In this way, the whispering mushroom is more than just a quirky bit of lore. It is a symbol of the hidden burdens that Ooo, and perhaps all of us, continue to carry. The interaction with Finn and Jake reveals this power most clearly. They are characters often so full of life, so direct in their battles against evil. Yet even they are unsettled by the mushroom's voice. It does not roar at them. It does not even truly attack. Instead, it undermines. It makes them pause, makes them wonder, and fills the silence with words that are not their own. For a moment, it feels as though the balance of their thoughts has been shifted. And in that shift, we see how fragile peace really is. There is a kind of folklore quality to this moment as well. Mushrooms, in many ancient stories, are tied to spirits, to otherworldly influences, and to dangers lurking beneath the surface. Travelers were warned not to step into circles of mushrooms, not to eat from them carelessly, for they were believed to be doors into other realms or traps laid by trickster spirits. The whispering mushroom fits perfectly into this tradition, acting as both a literal danger and a symbolic one. In its whispers, it suggests that Ooo itself is still full of haunted corners, where old evils hide in plain sight. And if we lean into speculation, we might imagine how far this corruption could reach. If a single mushroom can whisper, how many others might exist across Ooo, carrying fragments of the Lich's essence? How many roots have sunk beneath the ground, unseen by heroes, waiting for the right time to sprout? The story never answers these questions directly, and perhaps that is what makes them so haunting. Sometimes the fear of what might be is more powerful than what is plainly seen. The mushroom also reminds us that the Lich's influence is not limited to flesh or bone. He does not need a body to continue his work. He does not even need presence in the traditional. A whisper, a suggestion, an echo, these are enough. It shows us that evil is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it moves like a shadow, slipping into quiet places where few would think to look. In this way, the mushroom is not just a curiosity, but a lesson. Vigilance is not about expecting the roar of battle, but about noticing the faintest changes in the silence. There is, of course, another layer worth considering. Mushrooms are part of cycles of decay and renewal. They break down the old, turning it into something new. In nature, this process is essential, for without decay, life could not begin again. And yet here, with the whispering mushroom, that cycle is twisted. Instead of nurturing renewal, it nurtures corruption. It becomes a parasite, not just feeding on death, but feeding on the hope that follows. The Lich, through this strange vessel, takes what should be natural and turns it into a weapon. When we think of the mushroom in this way, it becomes deeply poetic. It tells us that even in a world rebuilding itself after the end, there will always be forces that try to twist that rebuilding into something darker. The whispering mushroom is not about the grand, destructive gesture. It is about the slow corruption of what is growing, the way weeds creep into gardens if left unchecked. And so it becomes not just a villainous artifact, but a metaphor for how easily hope can be undermined if we are not careful. In the quiet rhythm of Oo's story, the whispering mushroom stands out precisely because of its subtlety. It is not grand, nor does it demand immediate attention. And yet, like many of the most powerful symbols in Adventure Time, its power lies in what it represents rather than what it visibly does. The mushroom reminds us that evil is not always destroyed in one decisive moment. Even when the great battles are over, something remains, and it is often in these small remnants where the truest danger hides. Consider the nature of Finn's journey itself. He is a hero of action, of bravery, of forward momentum. He fights with his sword, with his fists, with his heart. Against foes like the Lich, he expects confrontation, something he can throw himself into with all the energy of youth. The mushroom, however, offers no such clarity. It does not fight back in the way he understands. Instead, it challenges him in a realm he is less accustomed to, the realm of thought, of patience, of whispers that cannot be silenced with a single strike. In this way, it becomes not only a fragment of the Lich's malice, but also a challenge to Finn's very nature as a hero. It asks, what do you do when the enemy is not outside, but inside your own mind? The mushroom also widens the scope of how we understand the Lich. If he can exist in whispers, if he can live through a humble stalk of fungus, then perhaps his essence is far more pervasive than the characters, or we, the audience, truly realize. The Lich has often been described as the embodiment of death, entropy, and decay. If that is true, then it makes sense that he would seep into the very processes of nature itself. Where there is decay, there is the potential for his presence. Where something has ended, his shadow may linger. The mushroom becomes a perfect vessel for this truth. Because it does not fight against its environment, it thrives in it. One could even imagine the mushroom as the beginning of a larger plan, a way for the Lich to continue his influence in the world without drawing direct attention. It is easy to spot a skeleton king cloaked in green fire, but who notices a small fungus at the base of a tree? Who worries about a tiny whisper heard only at night? In this way, the mushroom could be thought of as one of the Lich's most effective strategies. It hides in plain sight, unthreatening, until its influence has already taken root. Thematically, this ties deeply into one of Adventure Time's most recurring ideas, that the past is never truly gone. Ooo is built on the ruins of a fallen world, its candy-colored landscapes covering scars of nuclear fire and human collapse. The whispering mushroom is another scar, one that continues to pulse faintly with the memory of the Lich's devastation. It is the world itself remembering what once tried to end it. And memory, especially when whispered into the mind, has a way of shaping the present. It is also worth noting how the mushroom embodies fear in a particularly quiet form. Fear is not always about loudness, about terror that overwhelms the senses. Sometimes, fear is the faint voice that makes us question ourselves, that unsettles us when we are otherwise safe. It is the sound you think you hear in an empty room, the unease that creeps into dreams. The mushroom is this kind of fear. It does not need to shout because the human, or in this case the heroic mind, is skilled at amplifying whispers on its own. The mushroom plants the seed, and imagination does the rest. And what of its whispers themselves? Though the show gives us only glimpses, we can imagine the kinds of thoughts such a creature might sow. It would not be overt commands, for those could be resisted. Instead, it would be subtle nudges, reminders of failure, suggestions of doubt, temptations toward despair. Perhaps it might speak in the voice of one's own conscience, blurring the line between self and corruption. In this way, the mushroom is more dangerous than any visible foe because it uses the mind as its battlefield. If we pause to reflect, this is what makes the mushroom so haunting in a bedtime story context. It asks us to consider how many of our own darker thoughts are truly our own, and how many are whispers we have picked up along the way, from the past, from fear, from lingering shadows that never quite left us. The mushroom becomes a metaphor for those unseen influences, the quiet voices that shape us when we least notice. In the end, the whispering mushroom is not just a strange artifact left behind by the Lich. It is a lesson about vigilance, about the persistence of darkness, and about the fragility of peace. It tells us that even when the surface of the world seems calm, there may be whispers below, carried through roots and soil, waiting for the right moment to rise again. When we consider the whispering mushroom alongside other remnants of the Lich, it becomes clear that his darkness is never confined to one form. His essence is more like a contagion than a person, something that infects, adapts, and survives even when its host body has been destroyed. The mushroom is proof of this. It is not the Lich in full, but a shard of his being, a single spore that fell into the fertile soil of Oo's fractured reality. And as spores do, it grew quietly, weaving threads through the unseen. The very nature of mushroom, with their hidden mycelium networks beneath the ground, makes this even more symbolic. Above the soil, one sees only a small stalk, but beneath, vast webs of life and decay stretch outward, unseen yet essential. If we imagine the Lich's corruption working in the same way, then perhaps the whispering mushroom is not alone. Perhaps it is but one fruiting body of a larger network, a hint of roots that stretch across Ooo, connecting unseen places with his lingering malice. The thought itself is enough to make one shiver softly, even while lying safely beneath a blanket. And yet there is something strangely fitting about the Lich finding a home in a mushroom. Mushrooms grow in the shadows, in the forgotten places. They rise from decay and thrive where life has ended. They are neither plant nor animal, but something between, an echo of endings that paradoxically brings new beginning. In a darker sense, the whispering mushroom captures, bending it toward despair. It is decay without renewal, entropy without rebirth. It is nature's process, hollowed out, its balance stolen to feed only destruction. In this way, the mushroom becomes a reflection of the larger themes of Adventure Time. The show has always explored the balance between life and death, growth and decay, joy and sorrow. The whispering mushroom is a reminder that imbalance always seeks to creep in. Just as the Lich seeks to unmake all things, the mushroom twists the natural process of decay into something parasitic. It does not break things down to nurture life. It breaks them down to hollow them out. For Finn, Jake, and all the heroes of Ooo, this lesson is a heavy one. Their journey is not simply about defeating grand enemies in battles of fire and steel. It is about remaining vigilant against the smallest whisper, the quietest threats. For what good is victory in battle if despair or corruption can still seep in afterward? The mushroom teaches that danger is not always loud, and that silence itself can be treacherous. There is also an almost dreamlike quality to this detail. The idea of walking through a forest, stumbling upon a mushroom that suddenly speaks with a voice not your own. It is both surreal and unsettling. It feels like a fragment from a bedtime fable, where ordinary things carry secret powers and shadows hide unexpected truths. This is part of Adventure Time's strange magic. It takes something whimsical, even silly, and twists it just enough to reveal something deeper. The mushroom is comical in appearance, yet terrifying in implication. It straddles the line between the absurd and the profound, much like the show itself. As we close our reflection on this peculiar remnant of the Lich, one truth becomes clear. The mushroom is not meant to be defeated in the traditional sense. It cannot be struck down with a sword or erased in a single moment. Its role is to remind us that some evils do not vanish. They change shape, they wait, they whisper, and in those whispers, they test the resilience of those who listen. The whispering mushroom is not just a seed of corruption. It is a seed of thought. It plants questions in the mind. What if the Lich never truly left? What if his shadow stretches farther than we realize? What if the decay beneath our feet is not simply natural but purposeful? These are questions that linger long after the episode ends, like echoes carried into dreams. And perhaps that is the truest form of fear. Not the battle itself, but the doubt that follows. Not the enemy we can see, but the possibility that he still lingers, unseen, whispering softly in this dark. The Lich's whispering mushroom is, in the end, a quiet monument to his persistence. Small, strange, easily overlooked, and yet eternal in its own way. It tells us that evil, like decay, does not always shout. Sometimes it waits beneath the surface, speaking only when the night is still, when the mind is tired, when the heart is most vulnerable. The Land of Ooo is alive with color and laughter, yet behind its bright hills and candy-coated skies, there are stories that speak in quieter tone. Some tales are not sung in ballads or written in history books. They move instead like shadows, softly drifting through the forgotten corners of the world. And among these stories rests the journey of Ghost Princess, a figure who walks between life and death, remembered not by kingdoms or by great monuments, but by the faint echo of her spirit. Ghost Princess does not command armies or cast spells that shake the earth. She is not a force of destruction like the Lich, nor a chaotic trickster like Ricardio. She is something gentler and perhaps more haunting. a reminder of lives cut short, of voices silenced, and of mysteries left unresolved. Her story is not one of loud battles, but of quiet persistence, and in that quietness, we find both sadness and beauty. When we first meet Ghost Princess, she is already a shade, pale, translucent, and bound to the spirit world. Her appearance is striking, not because of grandeur, but because of its simplicity. She carries herself with the softness of someone who has long accepted her fate, and yet, beneath her calm demeanor lies a longing that has not yet found peace. Ghost Princess is caught in that delicate in-between space where memories remain, but clarity is just out of reach. What makes her tale so compelling is that even in death, she seeks truth. Unlike many spirits who simply wander, Ghost Princess yearns to know the story of her own end. There is a fragility to this quest. How many of us, if given the chance, would dare to look back at our final moment? But for her, it is not only curiosity. It is the key to her release. Until she uncovers the truth of her death, she cannot move on. She is tethered to the world of Ooo, drawn back by unfinished questions. The path to this truth is quiet, unfolding not through battle or great displays of magic, but through conversations, through fragments of memory, and through the help of others. Her search reflects one of Adventure Time's gentlest themes, that sometimes resolution does not come from grand gesture, but from piecing together small details, from listening, from remembering. In this way, Ghost Princess becomes more than just a side character. She becomes a vessel for the idea that the past is never truly gone, and that stories, even forgotten ones, still ripple forward. Her design itself reflects this tone. Draped in a soft gown, her form faint and hazy, Ghost Princess resembles the spirits of folklore across cultures, the ones said to linger in forests, castles, and ruins. Yet, unlike the frightening apparitions of horror tales, she is not meant to terrify. She is meant to remind. She is sorrowful, but not malicious, lonely, but not vengeful. Her presence is gentle, like the fading glow of a candle, and it is this gentleness that makes her story so quietly heartbreaking. And as we walk with her through her memories, we realize that Ghost Princess is not only searching for her past, she is searching for meaning. In the Land of Ooo, where magic and chaos often define destiny, her journey is profoundly human. To want to know who we were, to want to understand the end of our story, is something we all share. Ghost Princess represents that universal longing, the desire to find closure, even when closure feels just out of reach. This is why her tale fits so seamlessly into the bedtime rhythm of lore. It is not a tale that jolts or unsettles with sudden fear. It is a story that drifts like a sigh, soft and haunting, encouraging us to reflect on our own lives in the quiet moments before sleep. Through her, Adventure Time reminds us that even the smallest characters can carry truths as vast as kingdom. But Ghost Princess's story isn't just about tragedy, it's about silence. Not the comfortable silence of a quiet room or the peaceful hush of night, but the heavy kind of silence that comes from being forgotten. Imagine existing in a world where people look right through you, where even when you stand in front of them, you're not seen, not acknowledged, not remembered. That is her burden. When Finn and Jake meet her, they don't recognize her either. And it's not because they've never seen her before. It's because her life, her identity, her story has been erased from memory itself. The ache of this truth lingers like a ghostly weight, a reminder that sometimes the cruelest fate isn't death, but being erased from the narrative of the living. There's something so haunting about that idea. We live, we laugh, we love, and we hope that those moments create echoes in the hearts of others, in stories passed down, in little memories that last beyond us. Ghost Princess has none of those. Her spirit roams in the void of absence, and every step she takes seems to ask the question, if no one remembers me, did I ever exist at all? And yet what makes her tale so compelling isn't just the sorrow, it's the beauty of how she handles it. Ghost Princess doesn't rage against her condition in the way many cursed beings might. She doesn't claw at the walls of her fate. Instead, she walks through the world with a strange sort of grace, her loneliness carried quietly, like a veil draped across her shoulders. The episode that explores her story draws us into the strange, liminal space where the living and the dead overlap. It's not bright or colorful like most of Ooo. It's muted, soft, tinged with melancholy. The other ghosts around her reflect the wide spectrum of what the afterlife might mean. Some cling to old grudges. Some linger with unfulfilled desires. Some seem confused about what happened to them at all. But Ghost Princess stands apart. She isn't loud. She isn't angry. She's simply waiting. And what is she waiting for? That's where her story pierces the heart. She longs to know who she was, how she died, and why no one remembers her. It's not the act of death itself that unsettles her, but the unanswered questions it left behind. In a sense, her journey mirrors something deeply human. Don't we all, in some quiet corner of our minds, want to be remembered? Don't we fear that our names, our voices, our essence will dissolve into nothingness once we're gone? There's something universal in Ghost Princess's struggle. Her character transforms from a side note in the Land of Ooo into a mirror of our deepest insecurity. Every sigh she releases into the empty air feels like the echo of that universal question. Will I leave a mark? Will anyone remember me when I'm gone? But here's the twist. Adventure Time, in its strange and brilliant way, doesn't leave her in eternal despair. Finn and Jake, being who they are, refuse to let her fade into nothing. They try to uncover her past, piecing together scraps of memory, wandering through places heavy with echoes of her life. And though it's not easy, though the shadows try to keep her hidden, pieces begin to emerge. We learn that Ghost Princess's death wasn't just random, it had meaning, and it involved betrayal, violence, and choices that altered her fate forever. Her own story, once smothered by silence, begins to take shape again. And it's in this unraveling that we realize something profound. Remembrance can be resurrected. Memory is always gone forever. This part of her arc almost feels like a lullaby sung to the forgotten. A whisper that says, even if time erases, even if shadows swallow names, stories can still be rediscovered. Lives can still matter even if they were silenced before. And isn't that strangely comforting? To know that no matter how quiet the world gets, no matter how deep the silence may grow, there is always a chance, just a flicker, that someone will stumble across our echoes and bring them back to life. Ghost Princess teaches us that forgetting is never absolute, that remembrance, like a candle, can always be relit, even in the darkest of rooms. What makes Ghost Princess's tale so piercing is that her story intertwines with others, weaving a thread of tragedy that goes beyond her own existence. She wasn't simply forgotten because of time. Her life was stolen, cut short by a cruel act. When Finn and Jake help her uncover the truth, it's revealed that she was killed by one of the very people she trusted. A betrayal so sharp it left no trace, almost as though the world itself wanted to bury the memory alongside her body. Think about that for a moment. Not only does she suffer the loneliness of being forgotten, but the very reason she's a ghost at all comes from the hands of someone she once believed in. There's a dark irony in it, isn't there? The ones we let closest are sometimes the ones with the sharpest knife. And the wound left behind isn't just in the flesh. It lingers in the soul, echoing across the afterlife. Yet Ghost Princess doesn't become bitter. That's the detail that fascinates me most. She doesn't plot revenge. She doesn't curse her betrayer. She doesn't scream into the void, demanding justice. She simply exists in her quiet sadness, searching for the fragments of her story like a puzzle with missing pieces. There's something almost heroic in that kind of patience, that resilience against the temptation of vengeance. And it's here that we see the brilliance of Adventure Time's darker figure. Ghost Princess isn't frightening because she's a ghost. She's frightening because she embodies what so many of us secretly dread: being erased, being misunderstood, being silenced by those we trusted most. She isn't a monster we run from. She's a reflection we don't want to face. Her interactions with Finn and Jake add a gentle warmth to this otherwise chilling tale. They see her, they hear her, they acknowledge her existence in a way that no one else has. And that acknowledgement alone begins to shift something in her. Isn't that a powerful thought? Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone, living or dead, is simply to say, I see you. I remember you. You matter. This is where Ghost Princess's story transforms from one of despair into one of subtle hope. She doesn't get a grand resurrection. She doesn't reclaim her life in some dramatic fashion. Instead, she receives something far more delicate, but just as profound. The truth. The truth of how she died. The truth of who she was. And the truth that her existence, though erased from most, still had meaning. And when she learns that truth, she doesn't cling to the world of the living. She doesn't resist the inevitable. She accepts it. That acceptance is hauntingly beautiful because it shows us that remembrance doesn't always mean clinging forever. Sometimes being remembered just long enough is enough to let go peacefully. There's something almost lullaby-like about that realization. The way Ghost Princess fades once her story is pieced back together feels like the final note of a song that had been lingering unresolved for far too long. The tension breaks, the silence lifts, and for a fleeting moment, we feel the weight of her presence before she slips back into the shadows. Not forgotten, but finally at rest. What stays with us isn't the details of her betrayal or even the exact cause of her death. What stays is a feeling, that quiet ache that makes us wonder about our own lives. Who will remember us when we're gone? Will anyone piece together our story if it's scattered and incomplete? Or will we too fade into a silence that swallows names and faces whole? Adventure Time, through Ghost Princess, doesn't give us easy answers. Instead, it leaves us with that unsettling blend of sadness and comfort. Yes, we may all be forgotten one day, but no, that doesn't erase the fact that we lived, that we mattered, and that in some corner of the universe, the echo of our existence will still hum softly, even if no one hears it. In her quiet way, Ghost Princess teaches us about impermanence. She reminds us that existence is fleeting, that memory is fragile, but also that beauty can be found in that fragility. Just like a candle burning low, the light doesn't need to last forever to matter. It only needs to shine for a while, to warm the room, to guide someone's path before flickering out. And isn't that, perhaps, enough? Ghost Princess lingers in our imagination because she represents the fragility of memory itself. Unlike figures such as the Lich or Ricardio, she does not wield powers of destruction or schemes of manipulation. Her existence is quieter, subtler, yet just as unsettling. She is a whisper in the night, a figure you might feel beside you, but never fully see. A reminder that the scariest shadows are not those that roar, but those that fade without ever being noticed. What strikes me most is how her story is uniquely human. We may never encounter a cosmic monster or a magical villain in our lives, but we all carry within us the fear of being forgotten. Adventure Time, in its dreamy and surreal way, holds up a mirror through Ghost Princess, showing us a reflection of loneliness, but also the profound desire for acknowledgement. Her sadness is not about vengeance or rage. It is about longing to be seen and remembered. It makes you think about the people we pass by in our own life, those who might be sitting quietly in the background, carrying stories we'll never know. Sometimes, what they need most is not our solutions, not our answers, but simply our presence, our willingness to witness their existence without letting it dissolve into silence. In a way, Ghost Princess is every unspoken story, every voice that fades into the static because no one leaned close enough to listen. The beauty of her tale is heightened by the setting itself. The Land of Ooo is often loud and colorful, filled with eccentric personalities and vibrant kingdoms. And yet, tucked away in a corner of this whimsical land is a quiet ghost who stands in stark contrast. She doesn't command the scene with bright colors or chaotic energy. She exists as a muted note in a song full of noise, and that muted note is what makes the harmony complete. Without her, Ooo would lose a vital layer of its depth, the reminder that beneath the candy and laughter lies the shadow of mortality. When Finn and Jake help her remember, it is not simply about solving a mystery. It is about connection. The moment they show her kindness, her silent sorrow becomes illuminated. This shift from invisibility to acknowledgement is, in its own way, a victory greater than any battle. And once she finally knows her story, she doesn't linger angrily. She chooses release. This choice is powerful because it highlights another lesson. Letting go is not the same as being forgotten. Ghost Princess shows us that release is not an erasure. It is a transformation. She lets go not because her story didn't matter, but because it finally mattered enough to be heard. And that is where peace lies, not in eternal remembrance, but in being recognized, even if only briefly, before stepping back into the stillness. Her narrative also invites us to consider the spaces in Adventure Time that often go unexplored. We think of the Land of Ooo as lively and strange, but Ghost Princess reminds us that even here, spirits linger, carrying their unfinished tale. She suggests that Ooo is layered, not just in physical landscapes, but in emotional ones. The land is haunted, not only by nuclear scars and magical ruins, but by memories too fragile to endure without care. Ghost Princess is one of many, but she is the one we are allowed to see, the one who offers us a glimpse of the spectral stories hidden beneath the surface. Her presence turns Ooo into more than a playground for colorful characters. It makes it a resting place for forgotten lives, a realm where laughter and loss coexist side by side. That duality, joy and sorrow, life and death, presence and absence, is what makes the world feel so complete. Without Ghost Princess, we might forget that Ooo, like our own world, is both dazzling and haunted. When we tuck ourselves into bed and think of her story, it almost feels like a lullaby, sung from the other side of silence. Her voice doesn't cry out. It hums softly like wind brushing against an old window pane. It is enough to make us shiver, but also enough to soothe us, reminding us that even if everything fades, the quietest stories still ripple in the dark. So perhaps the lesson she leaves us with is that we should strive to notice the forgotten, to honor the invisible, and to gently hold space for stories that may otherwise be lost. In doing so, we become like Finn and Jake, small heroes in a vast, noisy world, simply offering acknowledgement where it is most needed. Ghost Princess may not roar like the Lich or unsettle like Ricardio, but her haunting is no less real. She is the weight of memory's fragility, the echo of betrayal's sting, and the tender ache of impermanence. Yet, in her stillness, she carries something rare, a quiet grace that lingers with us long after the story ends. And in that lingering silence, when we finally close our eyes, she becomes part of our dreams too. Not as a villain, not as a monster, but as a reminder that even in forgetting, there is beauty in the moment of being remembered. The Land of Ooo is often shown to us as bright and whimsical, filled with candy-colored kingdoms, strange, laughing faces. Yet when we look closer, we notice how the world is never fully at rest. There are shadows between the laughter, empty corners, something lingers unseen. Beyond the towering kingdom, sparkling rivers are spirits, silent wanderers who carry with them the heavy echoes of the world that came before. These spirits are not always named, not always explained, but their presence is undeniable. They drift through Ooo like fragments of memory, unable to fully fade, and unable to fully belong to the living. Each one seems to carry a story, but unlike the colorful characters who chatter and scheme, these ghostly figures often have no voice. They are reminders carved into the edges of the land, whispering truths that the cheerful surface would rather cover up. When we think of Adventure Time's world, it is easy to forget that it is built upon ruins. Beneath the candy and the glitter lies the skeleton of a civilization that ended long ago. The Mushroom War left scars not only in the soil and sky, but also in the invisible spaces of memory. In many ways, the hidden spirits of Ooo feel like the war's aftershock, not physical destruction, but emotional resonance. Souls left untethered, stories left unresolved, grief that never found a resting. Some of these spirits are fleeting, appearing only for a moment in a background frame, translucent shapes hovering in the quiet. Others, like Ghost Princess, have a clearer form and a story we can trace. Yet most of them remain mysterious. They appear as children lost in empty forests, as faces peeking through castle walls, as shadows that flicker in the corner of vision. They never intrude and never scream. They simply remind us that Ooo is alive with both laughter and mourning. One of the most haunting aspects of these hidden spirits is how easily they are overlooked. Just as Ghost Princess lived unseen until Finn and Jake stumbled upon her, many of Oo's spectral figures exist without acknowledgement, and this makes their presence even more powerful. They are not written to the larger adventures, but they are always there, waiting at the edge of sight. It is as though the world itself has chosen to keep them hidden, like secrets buried under the cheerful mask of candy-colored kingdom. Their existence makes us question what kind of world Ooo truly is. Is it a land of rebirth and play, where new life has flourished from nuclear ash? Or is it a haunted graveyard where every tree, every stone, every river carries the imprint of those who once lived and perished? Perhaps it is both. And perhaps that is why Ooo feels so dreamlike, because it holds within it joy and grief interwoven, like light and shadow dancing across the same fabric. These wandering echoes also remind us of the fragility of memory. Each spirit, seen or unseen, is like a fragment of history trying not to be erased. They are not written in books or recorded in songs. They are simply there, existing, because existence itself refuses to forget them completely. The living may not know their names, but the world remembers, and so they linger. There is something deeply soothing about this thought, even in its sadness. It suggests that nothing truly vanishes, not entirely. Even when forgotten by people, even when erased from records, some trace remains, floating like a faint hum through the air. The hidden spirits of Ooo are that hum. The reminder that loss does not mean emptiness. Loss leaves echoes, and sometimes those echoes drift like ghosts, brushing past us when the world grows quiet. As we reflect on these figures, we notice how they change the way we see Ooo itself. Suddenly, the candy-colored landscapes feel less like a cartoon fantasy and more like a living dream layered with memory. Every corner might hold a story. Shadow might contain a present. Ooo is not only playful, it is haunted. Haunted, not in a frightening way, but in a tender, melancholic way, as though the world itself refuses to let go of what once was. When we lean closer into these spectral presences, we start to notice how they echo the larger themes of Adventure Time. So much of the show's heart lies in exploring loss, change, and the weight of time. The hidden spirits are like living metaphors for those themes, unresolved echoes, wandering through a world that has moved on without them. Consider the strange apparitions that linger near ancient ruin. Sometimes, in a single frame, you might glimpse a pale shape standing among the crumbled stones of an old city. These ruins are not explained, but they are remnants of the human world that existed before the Mushroom War. Could these spectral figures be the last traces of that fallen humanity, unwilling or unable to pass on? If so, their silence becomes even heavier. They are not simply ghosts of individuals. They are the ghosts of an entire civilization. There are also stories tucked into episodes that hint at spiritual undercurrent. When Finn and Jake visit the spirit world, they cross paths with entities that don't fit neatly into the categories of villain or ally. These beings, ethereal and strange, drift with their own quiet purpose. Some are kind, some indifferent, others restless. But what binds them together is their sense of incompleteness, of being caught between the living and the forgotten. They are like dreams that never ended, wandering until they fade. And then there are moments where the spirits feel less like beings and more like memories made solid. Take the way certain landscapes in Ooo seem to hum with energy. A field where soldiers once fell, a cavern where ancient magic was sealed away. These places carry atmospheres that feel heavier than simple terrain. The ghosts that appear there may not even be people. They may be impressions left behind, emotional imprints that have gained form through the strange magical fabric of Ooo. It's fascinating to notice how Ooo itself seems to blur the line between memory and matter. The world is so saturated with magic and remnants of the old world that perhaps memory doesn't always fade. It lingers, takes shape, and walks among the living. In such a place, forgetting is almost impossible, because the land itself refuses to release its past. These spirits also serve as quiet teachers. They remind us, in their voiceless way, that the cost of survival isn't only carried by those who live on. It is carried, too, by those who were lost and left behind. They drift through the world, bearing witness to the generations that follow, a constant reminder that what came before shapes what is now. Think about the emotional weight this adds to characters like Finn. His adventures are full of laughter and chaos, yet woven into the backdrop are countless eyes watching, countless presences unseen but felt. He is not only a hero of the living, he is a figure moving across the graves of 1,000 forgotten lives. That haunting presence shapes the tone of his journey, even if he never realizes it fully. And isn't that a reflection of us, too? We walk through cities built on ruins, over fields where lives once unfolded. Rarely do we stop to consider the layers of existence beneath our feet, but they are always there, silent and invisible. Adventure Time, through its hidden spirits, reminds us of this truth gently, as if whispering, "Remember, you are not walking alone." It is easy to think of ghosts as frightening, but in Ooo, they are rarely portrayed as threats. Instead, they are melancholy companions, shadows of memory that hover at the edge of sight. Their presence transforms fear into reflection. They are not here to scare us, but to remind us that loss is a part of life, and that even in forgetting, something always lingers. In this way, the hidden spirits of Ooo deepen the dreamlike quality of the show. Dreams, after all, are full of echoes. Faces we recognize but cannot name. Voices we hear but cannot place. Ooo, with its wandering spirits, feels like a dream where the past refuses to vanish, always brushing against the present like a soft, unseen breeze. When we linger on these hidden presents, it becomes clear that they are not random touches of artistry, but purposeful reminders that the Land of Ooo carries history in every stone and shadow. One striking example comes from the countless ruins scattered across the landscape. Some are just fragments of walls, others collapsed towers, but every so often, the animators give us a glimpse of pale figures moving through them. They are easy to miss, yet once you notice them, you cannot help but wonder, are these spirits tied to the ruins themselves, or do they wander because they have nowhere else to belong? We might recall the episode The Vault, where Shoko, the past incarnation of Finn, haunts him through recurring visions. Though Shoko's spirit is eventually given peace, her story shows how easily lives in Ooo can slip between memory and shadow. She is a perfect example of how unfinished stories manifest spirits, lingering until acknowledgement releases them. Shoko's arc also suggests that Ooo itself has a kind of memory, one that allows forgotten souls to echo across centuries until their tale is told. There are also the quiet phantoms that appear in moments of transition, such as in the spirit world or the aftermath of magical battle. These aren't always explained, but they often resemble silhouettes of people lost long ago, flickering as if half-remembered dreams. They remind us that in Ooo, the veil between life and death is thin, fragile, and easily crossed. What is gone is never fully gone, and what remains is never fully solid. Consider also the eerie spirits connected to the nightosphere. While many of these beings take monstrous shapes, others are more ghostly, more sorrowful. They suggest that dimensions beyond Ooo are just as haunted, just as filled with wandering echoes of what once was. In this way, the spirits we see are not confined to one place or one time. They're universal, stretching across realms like threads of memory, woven through the fabric of existence. Even the smallest of spirits tell stories. Think of the spectral children seen in brief moments, their outlines glowing faintly forgotten forests. They carry no names, no backstory, yet their presence alone is enough to fill us with questions. Were they lost during the Mushroom War? Did they perish in the strange magical shifts that reshaped the world? Or are they something more symbolic, representations of innocence cut short by forces beyond their control? Their silence leaves the answers open, but the ache of their presence remains. What makes these hidden spirits so fascinating is how they force us to reconsider Oo's balance between joy and sorrow. We often think of the Land of Ooo as lighthearted because of its candy kingdom and talking animal. But these spirits remind us that joy in Ooo does not exist in isolation. It grows out of loss. It flourishes despite grief. The laughter of the living carries more meaning when we realize it rings out across a haunted land, defying the silence that surrounds it. It's also worth reflecting on how these spirits are portrayed visually. They are rarely grotesque or horrific. Instead, they are translucent, faint, often fragile in appearance. Their gentleness makes them feel more like memory than monsters. They drift rather than chase, observe rather than attack. This gentleness shifts our perspective of what a ghost is. In Ooo, a ghost is not an enemy, but a reflection, an unhealed wound, a quiet reminder, a whisper of what once mattered. This portrayal is deeply resonant for a bedtime story. It turns fear into something softer, something contemplative. It invites us to lie back and think not of the terror of death, but of the poetry of memory. Even in forgetting, there are fragments that live on. Even in silence, there are echoes that hum. These wandering spirits are like lullabies from the past, soft songs carried on the wind, reminding us everything that has been still leaves an imprint. As we imagine them, we can almost see Ooo in a different light, not just as a land of candy and chaos, but as a dreamscape layered with the footsteps of countless unseen lives. Every hill might be a burial mound, every forest a resting place, every shadow a lingering presence. Yet rather than making the land frightening, this makes it feel alive, alive with memory, alive with story, alive with echoes that stretch beyond time. And perhaps that is why Ooo feels so enchanting. It is not just colorful and playful. It is deeply haunted, and those hauntings are part of its beauty. These spirits are often seen as little more than whispers, the final traces of a civilization erased by catastrophe. But their persistence tells us something about the human condition, or perhaps the condition of all life. Even in death, the world remembers. Memory is imprinted in the very soil, in the fragments of brick and bone, and in the wandering forms that take shape from sorrow, longing, or unfinished business. Not all of these echoes are malicious. Some linger simply to be noticed, as to have their existence acknowledged before fading completely. Others seem to carry warning, looping endlessly through a reenactment of their final moments. Reminders of the fragility of the world and the danger of forgetting history. To encounter one of these wandering spirits is like stumbling upon a living monument, a memory preserved not in stone or writing, but in emotion, repeating itself like a broken song. Finn and Jake often pass by these apparitions without much thought, dismissing them as background oddities in a world already brimming with strangeness. Yet when you pause and consider what they truly represent, a chilling thought emerges. Ooo is not just alive with magic. It is haunted by its own past. These spirits reveal that the destruction which birthed this strange world is not entirely finished. Its echoes ripple forward, seeping into the present, shaping destinies and coloring choices, whether or not the living are aware. In some corners, particularly the ruins of what appear to be human suburbs or ancient metro stations, the spirits are stronger. They are not merely hazy shadows, but almost tactile presences. You can feel their weight in the air, hear a snatch of song, or catch the warmth of a vanished family meal as though the room itself is unwilling to forget. It is as if the collapse of the old world were so violent, so laden with collective emotion, that the ground itself refuses to release what once was. These spectral imprints are not confined to one form. Some appear as pale silhouettes walking endlessly toward a destination that no longer exists. Others manifest as strange glowing animals, perhaps carrying the memory of pets that once lived alongside humans. There are even whispers of more organized gatherings, hauntings where multiple spirits seem to replay a scene together, like actors forever locked in the final act of a tragedy. These are the most disturbing of all because they blur the line between memory and consciousness. Are these spirits aware, or are they simply echoes with no sense of self? Adventure Time never hands us a clean answer. Instead, it lingers in ambiguity, letting the audience wrestle with the haunting possibility that Ooo is filled with witnesses from the past who will never move on. This turns every cheerful adventure into something more layered. The land's vibrant forests and cheerful kingdoms are built atop a graveyard of voices, a silent chorus that drifts on the edge of perception. The hidden spirits of Ooo also reflect something about the living characters themselves. Just as the world cannot fully shed the weight of its past, neither can Finn, Marceline, Princess Bubblegum, or even the Ice King. They each carry ghosts of their own, not literal ones, but memories, regrets, and longings that shape their actions. The spectral presences in the background are a metaphor, mirroring the idea that nobody, whether alive or dead, can completely escape history. It clings, follows, and reshapes the present in ways we may not even recognize. This theme becomes particularly haunting when you consider how many characters in Adventure Time are, in essence, survivors of the old world. Marceline lived through it. Simon lived it. Princess Bubblegum, though born from mutation and science, is a result of it. Their very existence is intertwined with the destruction that birthed Ooo, and so the wandering spirits they sometimes encounter are not strangers, but fragments of a world they themselves emerged from. When you see a pale outline drift past a ruined building in the distance, it's easy to dismiss it as a bit of weird background detail, but within the context of Adventure Time's lore, that outline might be the last trace of someone who once laughed, loved, and struggled to survive. And so the next time Finn and Jake walk casually through a desolate field or an abandoned town, we as viewers are left to wonder how many unseen eyes are still watching. How many forgotten voices still whisper across the winds of Ooo, shaping the silence with their presence. The hidden spirits remind us that Ooo is not merely a land of whimsy and surreal humor. It is a place deeply scarred by what came before. And those scars do not fade quietly. They sing, they echo, they haunt, and in doing so, they ensure that the past is never truly gone. When people think of Adventure Time's villain, certain names always come to mind first. The Lich with his skeletal grin and apocalyptic ambition. Hunson Abadir with his terrifying demonic power, or Orgalorg. The cosmic horror hidden in the guise of Gunter the Penguin. These towering threats defined arcs, created nightmares, and pushed our heroes to their limits. But for every great villain who carved themselves into the mythos of Ooo, there are others who drifted in and out of the story, leaving only a faint trace behind. They were strange, unsettling, sometimes even comical, but always carried the air of something forgotten. These forgotten villains are more than throwaway characters. They are echoes of a world teeming with danger, uncertainty, and eccentric evil. They exist on the margins of the narrative. Their significance never fully explained, their stories never fully told. And yet when you look closely, you see that each one carries with them the same themes of decay, corruption, and madness that haunt the rest of Adventure Time's lore. Take Ricardio the Heart Guy. At first glance, he seems like a quirky gag, an anthropomorphic heart with a suave voice and unsettling charm. He tries to woo Princess Bubblegum and outshine Finn, but beneath the humor is something disturbingly grotesque. Ricardio represents the idea of love turned monster, desire warped into obsession. His very existence is an aberration, a heart torn from a body and given a will of its own. While his appearances are brief, his presence lingers as a reminder that even the most intimate parts of the human condition can mutate into something predatory. Then there are the tree witches, strange and manipulative beings who trick Finn and Jake in their pursuit of powerful magical artifacts. Their domain is unsettling, a twisted grove that feels both alive and hostile, as if the forest itself is conspiring against intruders. The witches themselves are not grand conquerors like the Lich, but they represent an insidious kind of evil, selfishness, cruelty, and manipulation, hiding in small corners of the world. These are the villains who thrive not on grand scheme, but on exploiting the vulnerable. We also cannot forget Ash, Marceline's untrustworthy ex-boyfriend. On the surface, he's just a bad partner, selfish and cruel in ways that feel all too real. But within the context of Adventure Time's universe, Ash becomes something darker. He embodies toxic relationships, using magic and manipulation to get his way. draining Marceline's spirit, just as he once stole Hambo, her beloved stuffed toy. He isn't terrifying in the apocalyptic sense, but in a personal, intimate way. Ash reminds us that not all villains wear crowns of bones or command armies. Some villains wound in ways that are smaller but more cutting, ways that leave scars long after the encounter is over. One of the most unsettling, forgotten figures is the blank-eyed girl, who appears in a story that feels more like a ghost tale than a typical Adventure Time episode. She is never explained, never fully understood. Her blank, expressionless eyes are the stuff of urban legends, her presence unsettling in a way that feels designed to burrow under your skin. Unlike other villains, she doesn't need motivation, backstory, or even words. Her terror lies in her ambiguity. She exists as a living nightmare, a manifestation of primal fear itself. And then, scattered across the show, are countless minor antagonists, cursed artifacts that ensnare their wielder, eccentric tricksters like Magic Man, and one-off creatures that embody decay, hunger, or madness. Many of them are defeated in a single episode and never mentioned again, but their existence hints at the sheer density of evil that lingers in Ooo. It is not just the Lich plotting in the shadows. The world itself is fractured and dangerous, producing adversaries in every crack and corner, each one a reminder of how unstable and uncanny life in Ooo can be. By focusing on these forgotten villains, we see another layer of Adventure Time storytelling. Evil in Ooo is not always grand or obvious. It is petty, bizarre, sometimes even pathetic, and that makes it all the more unsettling. Because in the end, what truly defines these figures is not that they were defeated and forgotten, but that they reveal the countless ways corruption can seep into the world. Some villains hunger for power, others hunger for attention, and some simply exist as manifestations of chaos, waiting in the margin for someone to stumble across them. As we journey deeper into this shadowy catalog of forgotten foes, we begin to notice a pattern. These characters, though fleeting, are often connected to themes of decay, loss, and the lingering scars of a broken world. They don't command armies or unleash cataclysm, but they carry a certain heaviness. They remind us that Ooo is not a neatly ordered place, but a patchwork of chaos, stitched together from the remnants of an old world. Each forgotten villain is like a frayed thread on that patchwork, small on its own, yet telling a larger story about instability and disorder. Consider the gut grinder, a bizarre beast who roams in search of gold. At first glance, it feels like a joke, a creature obsessed with eating treasure, feared by the townspeople for its destructive raids. But when the story unfolds, we see the gut grinder is more than just a silly monster. It represents greed taken to its grotesque extreme, a hunger that is never satisfied. In a land where survival often means scavenging for scraps, the figure of the gut grinder becomes symbolic of the dangers of unchecked desire. It is not about gold itself, but about obsession, consuming without end, until there is nothing left but destruction. Then there is the so-called dream ghost, who haunts Finn in his sleep. While this spirit is not a traditional villain in the sense of conquest or cruelty, its role is unsettling. It invades the most intimate space of all, the dreaming mind. The dream ghost embodies the way trauma and doubt can cling to it, even when we try to rest. Within the surreal tapestry of Adventure Time, dreams often act as windows into hidden truth. And so the dream ghost reminds us that villains can come from within, born of our own fears and unresolved struggle. Another peculiar figure is Maya the Sky Witch, who appears in a tale tied to Marceline and Princess Bubblegum. Maya is greedy, manipulative, and cruel in a quieter, more insidious way. She traps the souls of her victims, hoarding power through twisted bargains. Her presence reveals something chilling, that in Ooo, villains are not only monsters and warlords, but also parasites who feed off others' trust and desperation. Maya is not grand scale, yet she is dangerous in how she embodies the predatory nature of exploitation. In her actions, we see reflections of the world's darker instinct, power gained not through strength, but through manipulation. There are also smaller figures, sometimes no more than silhouettes in the background of stories, who carry with them a strange sense of menace. A passing thief in the Candy Kingdom, a cruel gang of roughhousers on the edge of Ooo, or an unnamed sorcerer glimpsed only once. All of these shadows remind us that Ooo is filled with dangers too numerous to count. Not every foe needs to be remembered for the weight of their actions to linger. Even the briefest villain leaves behind a whisper, a ripple in the waters of Oo's strange and fragile peace. When we weave these threads together, the forgotten villains become something more than curiosity. They serve as reminders that the world of Adventure Time is a living, breathing place where evil takes many forms. Some forms are mighty and terrifying, others subtle and absurd. Yet all of them contribute to the larger picture of Ooo, a world scarred by apocalypse, where brokenness has given rise to both beauty and corruption. What makes these villains particularly haunting is their transient. They appear, they unsettle, and then they vanish. Unlike the Lich, whose shadow looms across entire seasons, or the Ice King, whose sadness permeates countless episodes, the forgotten villains are defined by absence. We see them once or twice, and then they fade away, as though they were never truly part of the story. And yet when we recall them, they feel like fragments of nightmare, brief, strange encounters that leave us unsettled without explanation. This fleeting quality makes them feel almost like echoes of another world. Perhaps they are remnants of the time before the Mushroom War, strange survivors of chaos who never fully adapted. Perhaps they are the byproducts of lingering magic, accidents of creation that wandered into Ooo by chance. Or maybe they are simply reflections of the randomness of evil, proof that in a world as vast and strange as Ooo, not all villains need a grand reason for being. And so these figures on the margins remind us of an essential truth. Not every story is told in full. Sometimes the shadows remain in the corners, unresolved, unexplained, and unremembered. That is what makes them haunting. For in a world where everything feels alive, even the forgotten villains carry a quiet weight, shaping the dreamlike fabric of Ooo in ways we may never fully understand. Let us linger for a while on Magic Man, for he is one of the strangest figures to straddle the line between comedy and true menace. Though he is often remembered for his absurd tricks and chaotic humor, Magic Man embodies something profoundly darker. His cruelty is not born from hunger for conquest, nor from the despair of loneliness, but from sheer apathy toward the suffering of others. He torments Finn and Jake with spells that transform their bodies and warp their minds, laughing at their pain as though it were nothing more than a passing amusement. He is the embodiment of indifference, evil not through passion, but through detachment. And yet, even in Magic Man's story, there is tragedy. We learn that he was once a Martian, burdened by the loss of his wife and transformed by grief into a being of callous cruelty. This detail complicates him, turning what could have been a caricature into something closer to a fallen figure. It reminds us that even forgotten villains often carry depth, waiting to be uncovered by those who look closer. Magic Man is a reminder that grief can twist the soul in strange and terrible ways, creating villains not from ambition, but from despair left unchecked. Then there is Donnie, a creature whose role as a villain is almost accidental. Donnie causes chaos simply because of who he is, loud, reckless, oblivious to the harm he spreads. He is not malicious, yet he is destructive all the same. This blurs the line between villain and victim, forcing us to ask, is villainy defined by intention or by consequence? In Donnie, we see the possibility that some villains in Ooo are not consciously evil, but simply unable to live in harmony with the fragile balance of the world. His story adds another layer to this catalog of forgotten figures, showing that chaos itself can be a villain, even without a plan or desire behind it. We should also reflect on Meemaw, the tiny assassin cat who seeks recognition and glory. Unlike towering villains who inspire dread through sheer scale, Meemaw is dangerous precisely because of her ambition. She represents the idea that villainy does not need power to exist. It needs desire, persistence, and a willingness to harm others for self-gain. Meimao is unsettling because she is small, overlooked, yet relentless. Her presence reminds us that danger can lurk in the least expected places, and that ambition can fester even in the smallest of creatures. Other minor antagonists carry with them a kind of haunting absurdity, villains whose comical appearances mask the darkness beneath. Consider Choo's Goose, the trickster merchant whose dealings sometimes veer into malicious manipulation, or the deceptive business frogs who trap Finn and Jake in unfair contracts. These characters highlight one of Adventure Time's subtler truths, that not all evil is grand or terrifying. Some of it is banal, woven into the everyday, waiting quietly in a marketplace stall or hidden within a charming smile. It is this ordinariness that makes many forgotten villains so memorable in their own quiet way. They force us to see that villainy is not always cosmic in scope. Sometimes it is small, creeping, and insidious. It slips into the corners of life, disrupting peace in ways that are subtle yet lasting. And though these figures may never command the narrative spotlight, they shape the atmosphere of Ooo, contributing to its aura of unpredictability and unease. Even the smallest encounter with such villains can leave a ripple. A single bad trade, a cruel trick, or a careless act of greed can set off a chain of consequences. In Ooo, where magic, chaos, and memory intertwine, even a forgotten figure can shift the path of a story. That is perhaps why these characters remain so captivating long after they are gone. They linger in our minds, not for the scale of the deeds, but for the strange texture they add to the world. As we piece together this gallery of overlooked antagonists, it becomes clear that they represent the shadows between the grand battle. They are the ones who slip through the cracks, reminding us that Ooo is vast, alive, and brimming with strangeness. For every hero who takes center stage and every great villain who casts a long shadow, there are dozens of smaller figures whose stories unfold quietly, then vanish. And yet these are the figures that make Ooo feel endless, a land where every path could lead to a mystery, every doorway to a danger, every corner to an unsettling face half remembered. Forgotten villains carry with them an aura of incompleteness. They are puzzles without answers, questions left hanging in the dark, and perhaps that is what makes them so fitting for Adventure Time, a series that thrives on wonder, mystery, and the sense that there will always be something more just out of reach. To remember them is to remember that the story is bigger than any single arc, larger than any single character. Ooo is a world of countless tales, some whispered and half-finished, echoing in the margin, like dreams that slip away as morning light arrives. As the shadows of these forgotten villains stretch across Ooo, it becomes clear that their importance lies not in how much screen time they received, but in the atmosphere they create. They are the whispers between larger stories, the strange encounters that remind us the world is alive with mystery. Ooo is not a stage where only great battles are fought. It is a breathing realm, filled with both grand epics and fleeting nightmares. And the forgotten villains are like those nightmares, strange fragments of imagination that surface briefly and then fade, leaving behind only questions. Think of the blank-eyed girl once more, that figure who seems less like a character and more like a rumor come to life. She is a perfect emblem of what it means to be a villain in the margin. She does not need explanation to unsettle. She exists as a riddle, her emptiness more frightening than any backstory could ever be. She is not remembered for grand speeches or devastating powers, but for a single impression. The kind of impression that makes you look twice at the shadows in your own room before falling asleep. Adventure Time understood the power of such impressions, and through characters like the blank-eyed girl, it planted those dreamlike seeds in the minds of viewers. Others, like Maya the Sky Witch or Meimao the Assassin, speak to the way evil often cloaks itself in persistence. They return in small ways, their stories unresolved, hinting that the margins of Ooo are never truly silent. There is always some new threat, some trickster, some sorcerer hiding just out of view. This constant hum of danger keeps the world from ever feeling safe or finished. Even when a villain disappears, the memory of them lingers, and that lingering is itself a form of power. What is striking about these villains is how they reflect the larger themes of Adventure Time, that the world is strange, fractured, and layered with history. Ooo is the aftermath of an apocalypse, a land rebuilt from ruin, where magic and technology intertwine in unsettling ways. The forgotten villains feel like the byproducts of that ruin. They are the glitches in the new order, fragments of corruption that slipped through the cracks. Each one feels like a reminder that the world we see is only a thin surface, and beneath it lies chaos waiting to rise again. And yet not all of these figures are defined by terror. Some are humorous, ridiculous. Their designs may provoke laughter more than fear, but this too adds to their unsettling quality. For in Adventure Time, humor and horror often walk hand in hand. The absurdity of a tiny assassin cat or a heart-shaped villain with a smooth voice makes us smile, but that smile carries a nervous edge. These villains blur the line between comedy and menace, creating the uneasy feeling that anything can shift into darkness at any moment. Perhaps that is why they remain so haunting in memory. The great villains of Adventure Time give us closure. The Lich defeated, Orgalorg transformed, the Ice King reimagined as Simon. But the forgotten villains deny us that closure. They slip back into the shadows without explanation, leaving us to wonder where they went, what they might still be doing, and whether they will ever return. They feel less like characters in a story and more like the wandering spirits of a dream, appearing without reason, vanishing without warning, yet always leaving us changed. When we reflect on them now, they feel like distant echoes, and in a sense, that is exactly what they are. Echoes of the Mushroom War, echoes of human flaws, echoes of random chaos in a magical world. They are the unpolished pieces of a broken mirror, reflecting shards of truth without ever revealing the whole picture. And though they may not stand alongside the Lich or Hunson Abadir in the halls of Adventure Time's greatest villain, they occupy a quieter, stranger place. They live in the edges of our memory, just as they lived in the edges of the story. To speak of them is to acknowledge that Adventure Time itself thrives on incompleteness. The show figures in the margins. We carry with us the understanding that their absence is as important as their presence. They remind us that even in the quiet corners of Ooo, danger stirs, waiting patiently. They remind us that villainy is not only about destruction. To speak of them is to acknowledge that Adventure Time itself thrives on incompleteness. The show was never about answering every question or tying every thread into a neat bow. It was about the mystery, the wonder, the dreamlike sense that something was always just beyond our reach. Forgotten villains embody that feeling. They are unfinished stories, half-told nightmares, strange faces glimpsed in the dark, and like dreams, they may fade, but they never fully leave us. As we leave behind this gallery of figures in the margins, we carry with us the understanding that their absence is as important as their presence. They remind us that even in the quiet corners of Ooo, danger stirs, waiting patiently. They remind us that villainy is not only about destruction on a grand scale, but about the countless small corruptions that erode peace and stability. And they remind us that the story of Ooo is vast, so vast that even its forgotten shadows can hold us captive long after we close our eyes. These are the villains who do not dominate the legends, but haunt the edges. They are not remembered for their triumphs or their defeats, but for the feelings they leave behind. And in the end, perhaps, that is the truest kind of villainy. Not the power to conquer kingdoms, but the power to linger quietly in memory, unsettling us in ways we cannot explain. Adventure Time has always been wrapped in bright colors, silly joke. But beneath that playful surface, there's a deep and often unsettling darkness that gives the Land of Ooo its weight. This isn't just a kid's cartoon filled with quirky candy people and magical kingdom. It's a post-apocalyptic landscape built on the ruins of a great war, scarred by forgotten evil, haunted by broken souls, and brimming with shadows that remind us of the fragility of existence. The show doesn't always throw this darkness in your face. Instead, it hides it in plain sight, whispering from the corners of its whimsical world, waiting for viewers who dare to look closer. One of the earliest hints that Ooo isn't what it seems comes from its history. We're told about the Mushroom War, a cataclysmic event that wiped out much of the world before Ooo was reborn from the ashes. But the show rarely explains the details outright. Instead, it sprinkles quiet reminders, ruined cities, half-buried skyscrapers, and landscapes where nature has reclaimed broken machines. Finn and Jake wander across grassy plains and colorful mountains. Yet under their feet lie the remains of a destroyed civilization, eerily similar to our own. It's a chilling backdrop because it implies that the cheerful chaos of Ooo is built directly on top of tragedy. The candy-coated kingdoms are survivors of a world-ending event, and every laugh in the show is underscored by that silent history. But the darkness isn't just in the past. It lives in the present, too. Take the Nightosphere, for example, the terrifying realm ruled by Hunson Abadir, Marceline's father. At first glance, Hunson seems like a cartoonish villain, an over-the-top demon with a big appetite. But when we look deeper, the Nightosphere becomes a metaphor for more than just evil. It's chaos, it's hunger, it's a reminder of how unstable Ooo really is. The show's willingness to portray Marceline's complicated relationship with her father also pulls that darkness into the personal. The Nightosphere isn't just a scary alternate dimension. It's a representation of emotional baggage, family trauma, and the shadows that follow you no matter how far you try to run. This theme of darkness, hidden behind cheerful masks, shows up everywhere. Consider the Candy Kingdom itself. On the surface, it's one of the most colorful and silly places in the show. But Princess Bubblegum, its ruler, reveals just how grim it truly is. She's not just a sweet monarch handing out candy to her subjects. She's a scientist, an engineer, and sometimes a tyrant. Her subjects literally depend on her to exist, since many of them were created by her experiment. That means her role isn't just about ruling, it's about ownership, about playing God with the lives of her candy people. In a strange way, the Candy Kingdom is less a utopia and more a carefully controlled experiment. The cheerful faces of its residents mask the truth. They are products of Bubblegum's authority, and without her, they may not even survive. Ooo isn't just whimsical, it's ethically unsettling. And then there's the Lich, the embodiment of all that is wrong in the Land of Ooo. Unlike the goofy monsters Finn and Jake usually face, the Lich represents pure annihilation. His voice alone is chilling, slow, and deliberate, dripping with menace. The Lich doesn't want power, he doesn't want wealth, he only wants destruction. He's a reminder that underneath all the laughter and jokes, Ooo is still haunted by forces too ancient and powerful to fully defeat. Whenever the Lich appears, the tone of the show shifts. The colors darken, the music slows, and suddenly we're reminded that this world we've been laughing is one heartbeat away from total collapse. But what makes Adventure Time truly brilliant is how it doesn't separate the light from the dark. Instead, it weaves them together so naturally that they feel inseparable. Finn and Jake can be laughing at a dumb pun one moment, and the next, they're standing in a graveyard of ancient machines, staring at the remnants of a civilization destroyed by its own greed. Marceline can sing a goofy song with Finn, then quietly reveal her centuries of loneliness and grief. Bubblegum can host a party for her candy citizens, while simultaneously plotting to maintain absolute control over her kingdom. This duality gives the show its texture. The laughter feels brighter because the shadows are always there, lurking just out of sight. The Land of Ooo, for all its whimsy, is a place where survival matters. Characters carry scars, whether physical, emotional, or both. Finn struggles with identity, Marceline struggles with loss, Bubblegum struggles with power, and Jake, despite his easygoing nature, carries the burden of responsibility to protect his brother. These struggles aren't just side plots. They're constant reminders that Oo's beauty is fragile, built on shaky ground that could collapse at any moment. The genius of Adventure Time is that it doesn't simply tell us that Ooo is dark. It lets us discover it, piece by piece, through characters who embody the shadows in their own unique way. Take Marceline, for on the surface, she's a playful vampire who loves pranks and silly songs. But behind that humor lies a history soaked in pain. She's lived for centuries, long enough to see the old world crumble and the new one take shape. She's wandered the ruin, scavenged for survival, and lost people she loved. Even her relationship, Princess Bubblegum, layered with affection and bitterness, is haunted by the passage of time and all the things left unsaid. Marceline's music becomes the key to her soul, often breaking through the cheerful tone of the show with raw honesty. Her songs reveal loneliness, resentment, and the weight of living far longer than anyone else around her. Every strum of her bass guitar is a reminder that Oo's beauty is laced with sorrow. Then there's Simon Petrikov, the Ice King. If Marceline's story is about surviving the apocalypse, Simon's story is about losing yourself to it. His transformation from a kind, loving scholar into the rambling, unstable Ice King is one of the most tragic arcs in the series. What makes it even more haunting is that the magic crown that grants him power isn't just an accessory. It's a parasite. It slowly eats away at his sanity, erasing Simon piece by piece until only the Ice King remains. But fragments of Simon's humanity still shine through in moments of clarity, especially in his relationship with Marceline. Their bond is heartbreaking because it reminds us that beneath the Ice King's goofy exterior is a man who sacrificed himself to protect a child during the end of the world. Every time he babbles nonsense or sings a ridiculous song, the shadow of who he once was lingers in the background. He is both a comedic character and one of the show's greatest tragedies. Adventure Time also uses its side characters to expand on this theme of darkness. Consider the Flame Kingdom, ruled by Flame Princess. Her very existence is a contradiction. She's a being of fire, constantly struggling with destruction she cannot fully control. Her anger is a threat to others, but it's also a reflection of the way she was raised in isolation, treated as dangerous, locked away by her own father. That tension between who she wants to be and what her nature drives her to become is a constant reminder of how the characters in Ooo are caught between light and shadow. She isn't evil, but she's not entirely safe either. The line between hero and villain blurs, just like the line between playful whimsy, quiet horror in the world around her. Even Jake, the most laid-back character in the series, has moments where the shadows creep in. While Finn is obsessed with heroism and purpose, Jake often shrugs it all off with a joke or a nap. But every so often, we see glimpses that Jake understands the darkness better than anyone. He's lived through strange and dangerous times. He's seen what lurks beneath the cheerful surface of Ooo. He chooses humor and relaxation, not because he's ignorant, but because he knows how heavy the shadows can get if you stare at them too long. His philosophy is almost a coping mechanism. Find joy where you can, because the world will always carry more darkness than you can handle at once. The show also never shies away from unsettling imagery. Some of the creepiest episodes aren't even about monsters. They're about the uncanny and the surreal. Think of the episode No One Can Hear You, where Finn wakes up in a deserted candy kingdom and slowly realizes something isn't right. The emptiness, the silence, the broken logic of the world around him. It feels like a nightmare. The candy people are gone, and when they reappear, they move in strange, unsettling ways. It's not the kind of fear you'd expect from a kid's cartoon. It's something deeper, tapping into psychological unease. Adventure Time thrives on moments like this, where the line between dream and nightmare blurs, leaving the viewer with a sense of quiet dread that lingers long after the episode ends. But what's remarkable is how this darkness never fully swallows the story. Instead, it runs alongside the light, creating contrast and depth. Ooo is terrifying, but it's also beautiful. It's filled with nightmares, but also with laughter and friendship. It's this tension that makes the Land of Ooo feel alive, as though it exists beyond the screen. The shadows give weight to the silliness, making every joke feel earned. every adventure feel risky, every emotional moment feel raw. Without the darkness, Adventure Time would be charming, but shallow. With it, the show becomes a layered masterpiece that reflects the complexity of life itself. The figure who embodies this undercurrent more than anyone else is, of course, the Lich. If Ooo is a place where beauty and terror coexist, then the Lich is the embodiment of what happens when terror wins. He doesn't have the quirks or the layered humanity of other villains. He isn't tragic in the same way Simon is, or conflicted like Flame Princess. He is pure annihilation. His voice is a whisper that cuts deeper than a scream, and his presence is a shadow that drains all warmth from the world. The Lich doesn't need to shout his intention. His very being radiates. His purpose is extinction. What makes him terrifying isn't just his raw power, though. It's how he lingers even when he isn't on screen. His corruption seeps into the land itself, echoing through cursed mushrooms, haunted places, and strange creatures that feel just slightly wrong. He represents a kind of inevitability, the idea that no matter how whimsical or silly the surface becomes, there is always something waiting underneath, patient and endless. In a way, the Lich is less of a character and more of a natural force, the shadow cast by life itself. He doesn't chase Finn and Jake with armies or clever schemes. He doesn't need to. The threat of him is enough, like a storm cloud looming on the horizon, reminding us that the world can be wiped away in an instant. But even in the face of the Lich, Ooo never loses its light entirely. The show makes a point of showing us that corruption can be fought, that even shadows have boundaries. The final battle with the Lich is not just a confrontation with evil. It's a confrontation with despair. It forces Finn to grow, to see beyond the simplicity of good versus bad. Because what do you do when the enemy is not just someone who disagrees with you, but a force that wants to erase everything you love? The answer lies in resilience, in persistence, in choosing to create joy even when destruction looms. Finn's growth is the ultimate reflection of Oo's balance. At the start, he's just a boy with a sword and a simple dream of being a hero. He sees the world in clear, bright colors, villains to fight, friends to protect, adventures to chase. But as he travels through Ooo, he encounters the shadow. He learns about betrayal, heartbreak, and loss. He faces villains who aren't just bad but broken, haunted by their own tragedy. He learns that sometimes saving the day doesn't mean defeating a monster. It means helping someone carry their pain. By the time his story reaches its conclusion, Finn has matured into someone who understands that darkness is not something you can destroy forever. It's something you learn to live alongside, to resist, to push back against with love and laughter. The series finale, Come Along With Me, ties this all together in a way that feels both hopeful and haunting. The Land of Ooo faces destruction once again, not just from the Lich, but from new forces that threaten to tear it apart. And yet, the conclusion is not bleak. Instead, it highlights the idea that even though darkness will always return, so will light. Life in Ooo continues, passed down to new generations. Stories keep being told, songs keep being sung, friendships keep forming. The undercurrent of shadow never disappears, but it doesn't win either. It's simply part of the fabric of this strange, magical world. This duality is what makes Adventure Time so enduring. Most shows either lean into lighthearted comedy or dark, dramatic storytelling. Adventure Time does both, often within the same episode. One moment you're laughing at Jake turning into a stretchy chair, and the next you're sitting in silence as Simon scribbles a desperate note to the fiancée he can no longer remember. And that whiplash isn't accidental. It's the essence of life distilled into animation. Joy and sorrow walk hand in hand. Shadows stretch across the brightest days, and laughter can be found in the darkest nights. It's also worth noting how much of this tone comes from the setting itself. Ooo is not a generic fantasy world. It's Earth, post-apocalypse, scarred by war and rebuilt by magic. Every cheerful candy cottage and rainbow unicorn is standing atop ruin. Every silly gag takes place in a world that was nearly destroyed. That history seeps into every corner of the landscape, reminding us that nothing in Ooo is as simple as it seems. Even when the screen is filled with bright colors and playful shapes, there's an invisible weight pressing down, whispering that this beauty is fragile. That's why the show resonates with so many people. It mirrors the way real life often feels. The laughter is real, but so is the fear. Perhaps the most haunting part of Oo's shadows is how familiar they are. The fear of being forgotten, the pain of losing yourself, the inevitability of death. These aren't just fantasy concepts. They're reflections of the struggles we face in our own lives. When we see Simon fall to the crown's madness, when we hear Marceline sing about the emptiness she feels, when we watch Finn stumble through heartbreak after heartbreak, we're seeing pieces of ourselves. Adventure Time doesn't sugarcoat those truths, but it doesn't let them crush us either. It invites us to sit with them, to accept that shadows exist, and then to find comfort in the moments of light that break through. This balance between shadow and light is what gives Ooo its strange beauty. It's not a world where darkness is banished forever, nor one where hope is extinguished. Instead, it is a place where both coexist, swirling together like night and dawn. The undercurrent of shadow flows quietly beneath every bright landscape, reminding us that joy is precious precisely because it is fragile. When we think of characters like Ghost Princess or Ricardio, we see how even the smallest figures in the show carry this theme. They are not headline villains or central heroes, yet their stories whisper truths about loss, longing, and the strange persistence of life after pain. They remind us that the shadows are not just in the great apocalyptic battles or cosmic forces, but also in the quieter corners of existence. A spirit wandering the ruins of her death, a heart turned bitter by loneliness, a mushroom still whispering long after its master has fallen. These are all threads of the same fabric. And then, of course, there is Simon. Perhaps no one embodies the undercurrent more deeply than he does. His tragedy is not about world-ending destruction, but about the slow erosion of the self. He is a reminder that the greatest shadows are not always external threats. Sometimes they are the things that eat away at us from within. The loneliness, the fear, the memories we can't hold on to. And yet, Simon's story also shows us that even the deepest shadow does not erase the person completely. There are moments of clarity, of love, of connection that break through. His bond with Marceline, fragile and beautiful, is one of the purest rays of light in the entire series. Adventure Time never shies away from showing us the inevitability of ending. Empires fall, heroes age, friendships shift, and even the most magical adventures must conclude. But instead of painting that truth as purely sad, the show frames it as something gentle, even necessary. Endings give meaning to beginning. Shadows give depth to the light. Just as the Land of Ooo is built on the ruins of what came before, our own lives are built from both joy and sorrow, memory and loss. To accept that is to embrace the full texture of existence. One of the most beautiful aspects of this is how the show encourages us to find peace in small, fleeting things. A song sung around a campfire, a hug between friends, a quiet moment of honesty. These moments might not last forever, but they shine all the brighter against the backdrop of shadow. Ooo teaches us that it is one of the most beautiful aspects of this is how the show encourages us to find peace in small, fleeting things. A song sung around a campfire, a hug between friends, a quiet moment of honesty. These moments might not last forever, but they shine all the brighter against the backdrop of shadow. Ooo teaches us that it is not about defeating darkness once and for all, but about choosing again and again to create light in the spaces where it seems most fragile. As we drift toward the end of this reflection, think about how Adventure Time often left us with open-ended questions. What exactly became of certain spirits? How far did the Lich's corruption spread? Will Simon ever find peace? These mysteries aren't loose threads. They're reminders that life itself is never neatly tied up. There will always be shadows we don't fully understand, stories that don't end the way we expect, and questions that linger like echoes. Instead of answering everything, the show invites us to rest with the uncertainty, to accept that not every mystery needs resolution. Sometimes it is enough to simply wonder. And in that wonder lies the comfort. Ooo is not a perfect world, and neither is ours. Both are haunted by shadows, by forgotten villains, by spirits wandering through the ruins of what once was. But both are also filled with beauty, laughter, and love. The dark undercurrent does not erase the light. It makes it shimmer all the more. When we think of Ooo, we remember both the shadows and the songs, both the ruins and the candy castles, both the whispers of the Lich and the playful giggle of Jake. So as you lay here tonight, perhaps let your thoughts drift to that land of contrasts, a place where shadows linger but never fully win, a place where even the strangest, darkest corners carry meaning. And perhaps, like Finn, you too can learn that the way forward isn't to fear the shadows nor to try and erase them, but to walk alongside them with courage and kindness, to choose light again and again, even when it feels small. Adventure Time's legacy is not just in its whimsical characters or surreal landscapes, but in this lesson, that the world is both shadow and light, and that both are worth embracing. It is a bedtime story not just for children, but for anyone who has ever felt the weight of darkness and still reached for the warmth of dawn. And with that, our journey tonight through unexplored villains and dark figures comes gently to a close. From Ricardio's twisted longing to the Lich's lingering corruption, to the ghosts and forgotten spirits that echo through Ooo, we have seen how shadows weave themselves quietly through every story. They are reminders of fragility, but also of resilience. They show us that even in a world built on ruins, light continues to bloom. So let the images of Ooo settle softly in your mind as you drift into sleep. Let the shadows feel less frightening, and the light feel all the more comforting. For in every story, just as in every dream, both are always present, waiting for us to notice. Good night,